They didn't ask me to go to prison. They told me. 2 years, my father said calmly, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. Minimum security. You're used to struggling, Alice. You'll survive. Like he was assigning me an errand. Like he was asking me to pick up milk on the way home. The folder stopped inches from my hands. Inside it, tax fraud, embezzlement, forged documents. Every crime had one thing in common. None of them were mine. Across the room, my sister Beatrice sat curled on the sofa, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief that looked too clean to have absorbed any real tears. My mother rubbed her back gently, whispering comforts, like Beatrice was the victim of some cruel accident instead of the architect of it. They needed someone to take the fall. And that someone was me. Beatrice had a wedding next month. Sterling family money. Old money. The kind that didn't tolerate scandal. If this exploded, the engagement was over. Her life, their investment, would collapse. So they chose the expendable one. Me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. That would have surprised them. Instead, I let my hands shake as I picked up the folder, just enough to sell the part. Broken. Scared. Grateful for scraps. I need 24 hours, I whispered. To think. My father nodded, already bored. He thought he was looking at a frightened daughter. He had no idea he was staring at the person who was about to dismantle his entire world. Have you ever realized your family would light you on fire just to keep their favorite warm? Tell me, I'm not the only one. I drove away from their house with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. 2 blocks later, I pulled over, killed the engine, and just sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon I never signed up for. Why me? The answer was simple. And ugly. In my family, love worked like an economy. For 26 years, I was the spare part. The backup generator locked in the basement. Ignored until everything else failed. While I lived in a freezing 400-square-foot studio, eating instant noodles and studying under blankets to save on heat, Beatrice was living a life that didn't mathematically exist. Last winter, I scrolled through Instagram and saw her smiling in Bali. 5-star wellness retreat. Company research trip, the caption said. Her company had 0 clients. My mother commented, so proud of my visionary. They funded everything. Her trips, her Audi, the downtown loft she rented from friend. They kept pouring money into her, terrified that if they stopped, she'd collapse. And me? To Arthur and Martha, I was a data entry clerk. Quiet, unambitious, disposable. That was the lie I let them believe. Because the truth? I'm a senior forensic auditor. I don't type numbers. I hunt them. I find hidden assets, offshore accounts, shell companies. The kind of money people swear doesn't exist until I prove it does. I'm a shark in a beige cardigan. They never knew. They never asked. And sitting in my car that night, watching rain crawl down the windshield, something finally clicked. It wasn't hate. It was math. In their twisted worldview, success was a limited resource. If I had more, Beatrice would have less. So, for her to shine, I had to disappear. The star was falling now, and they'd come to the basement to drag me into the fire. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They had no idea I'd spent years learning how to burn houses of cards to the ground. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to work. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the neon sign flickering overhead like a dying insect. Red. Blue. Red again. I didn't go inside. I didn't want coffee. I wanted answers. My hands were still shaking, not fear anymore, but adrenaline. The kind that comes right before something irreversible. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat and tethered it to my phone's hotspot. This wasn't hacking. This wasn't illegal. This was something every adult had the right to do. I checked my own credit. I logged into the Consumer Credit Bureau portal, typed in my social security number, answered the security questions I knew by heart, and hit enter. The screen refreshed. I stopped breathing. I expected student loans. Maybe my old car payment. A thin, boring financial footprint. Instead, I was staring at a crime scene. My credit score sat in the low 500s. That alone felt like a slap. But then I opened the Accounts tab. 3 credit cards. All maxed out. Total balance, $45,000. My stomach tightened. Then I saw the business loan. Beist Consulting LLC. Beatrice's failed fashion startup. The one my parents claimed never really got off the ground. Principal amount, $50,000. Status, defaulted. My name was listed as the guarantor. I clicked the account details, my pulse roaring in my ears. I needed proof. Something clean. Something undeniable. And there it was. The recovery email for every single fraudulent account. Arthur.Whitford@gmail.com. My father. The air rushed out of my lungs as I leaned back against the headrest. They hadn't just decided tonight to sacrifice me. They'd been doing it for years. 5 years ago, while I was eating toast for dinner and rationing textbooks, they were using my identity to fund Beatrice's vanity projects. While telling me they couldn't help with rent. While smiling at me across holiday tables. They weren't careless. They were strategic. They were actively destroying my financial future to keep hers floating. Something strange happened then. My hands stopped shaking. You'd think this is where I'd cry. Where the betrayal finally broke me. It didn't. The tears evaporated, replaced by something colder. Sharper. Clarity. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't even a person. I was a resource. A line of credit. Something to be drained and discarded. And once I saw that truth, the last emotional thread snapped clean. I closed the laptop. I didn't go home. I didn't sleep. I went to work. Not my official office. I wasn't stupid enough to run personal searches on company servers. I went to my war room. A 24-hour co-working space I used for freelance consults. Quiet. Anonymous. By dawn, I had 5 years of Beist Consulting's bank statements spread across my screen. And it was worse than I imagined. This wasn't incompetence. It was looting. Beatrice had raised $250,000 from angel investors, friends of the Sterling family, by promising a revolutionary fashion app that never existed. The money hit the business account, then vanished. I traced the transfers line by line. $10,000 to a luxury travel agency. $5,000 to a Porsche dealership. $15,000 to a contractor. I froze at the contractor's address. It matched my parent house. They weren't just covering for Beatrice. They were on the payroll. Arthur had been skimming from his daughter's fraud to pay for country club dues and premium cigars. A closed ecosystem of greed, feeding itself, fertilized by my ruined credit. As the sun rose, painting the city gray, the legal side of my brain kicked in. If I went to the FBI right now, it would be messy. My name was on the loans. My identity was the foundation. Arthur would claim I was the mastermind, the silent partner. And with their social standing and my silence, a jury might believe him. I didn't need justice yet. I needed leverage. I scanned my parents' asset column. Retirement accounts drained. Credit cards maxed. Only one thing remained. The house. A 4-bedroom colonial in the historic district. Appraised at $1.5 million. Their pride. Their stage. Their lie. I opened a new browser tab. I wasn't going to report them. Not yet. I was going to make them hand me the knife. I've always believed real power is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It waits. I stared at my parents' house on the screen, its manicured lawn and white columns screaming respectability. That house was the last thing they had. The final mask. And it was almost paid off. If I touched it the wrong way, they'd smell blood and panic. Arthur was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. I couldn't confront him. I couldn't accuse him. I had to save him. That's when the plan clicked into place, so cleanly it scared me. I opened the Secretary of State website for Wyoming. Wyoming is special. It allows anonymous LLCs. No public members. No managers. A black box. I registered Nemesis Holdings LLC and paid the expedited filing fee. The confirmation email hit my inbox within minutes. Next, I drafted a quitclaim deed. 3 pages. Plain language. Almost boring. Arthur and Martha Whitford transferring 100% ownership of their property to Nemesis Holdings LLC for the sum of $10. I printed it and stacked it neatly beside the fraud evidence. 2 piles. Truth and consequence. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at Sarah. Sarah was a mobile notary I'd used during high-end foreclosures. Professional. Discreet. She didn't ask questions that didn't concern her. "Sarah," I said when she answered, "I have a signing tonight. Sensitive asset protection. I need you at my father's house at 8 sharp." There was a pause. "Rush fee. Double it." Another pause. "Understood." "And Sarah? Once the papers are signed, you leave immediately." I hung up before she could ask why. At 7:55 p.m., I walked back into my parent house. The study felt different now. The earlier aggression had curdled into impatience. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about timing. Beatrice paced like a trapped animal, checking her phone every few seconds. Probably terrified her fiancé would find out before she had a clean record. I slipped into character. Shoulders hunched, eyes down, voice small. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll take the fall." My mother exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath all evening. "Good. We knew you'd do the right thing." But then I let panic creep into my voice. There's a problem." Arthur's eyes sharpened instantly. "What problem?" I spoke to a lawyer friend. "Hypothetically." I swallowed. "Because the fraud is over $200,000, the feds won't just look for jail time." I paused. "They'll look for restitution." Silence. "They trace the money," I continued. "They know it paid for renovations here. If I plead guilty, they'll seize assets connected to the fraud." I gestured around the room. "This house is exposed." The color drained from Arthur's face. "They can't do that," he snapped. "They can," I said softly. "Unless we move it." I pulled the folder from my bag and placed it on the desk like a gift. "Transfer the deed. Tonight. Into an anonymous holding company. Nemesis Holdings. If the house isn't in your name when the investigation starts, they can't freeze it." Arthur flipped through the pages desperately. Then he froze. "This lists you as the managing member." I met his eyes and forced fear into mine. "That's why it has to be me. If your name is anywhere on this, they find it instantly. I'm just the straw man. I'll sign it back when it's over. You know I always do what you ask." He searched my face. What he saw wasn't a threat. It was dirt. Expendable. Loyal. Silent. Arthur laughed. "Of course," he said, grabbing a pen. "Sign it." At 8:02 p.m., Sarah arrived. She verified IDs, stamped the deed, and left with an envelope of cash. When her car disappeared down the driveway, the tension dissolved into arrogance. "You were useful for once," my father sneered. My mother poured herself wine. "Stop crying. Beatrice is the flower. You're the dirt." That word ended everything. I stopped crying. I placed my phone on the desk, screen facing them. The recording timer was still running. "I'm not going to the police," I said calmly. "And neither is Beatrice." For a second, no one moved. The only sound in the room was the faint ticking of my father's antique clock, the one he loved more than any of his children. My mother frowned at my phone. "What is that?" "A recording," I said. Calm. Almost gentle. "Of the last 40 minutes. You asking me to take the fall. Admitting the fraud. Talking about hiding assets." Arthur's face tightened. "Turn that off." I didn't. Beatrice stepped forward, panic finally cracking her perfect composure. "Alice, stop this. You're being dramatic." I smiled. "No," I said. "This is me being precise." I tapped the screen and locked it. "Nemesis Holdings now owns this house," I continued. "And I own Nemesis Holdings." Arthur lunged toward me. I didn't flinch. "Before you touch me," I said evenly, "remember the doctrine of unclean hands. If you sue me, that recording goes to the FBI. And to the Sterling family. Every investor. Every bank." He froze. The strongest man in my childhood, reduced to a statue by his own crimes. "You wouldn't," my mother whispered. I tilted my head. You taught me to survive. This is survival. Beatrice started sobbing for real now. Ugly. Desperate. You're ruining my life. I met her gaze. No. I'm returning it to its owner. Arthur sank into his chair, the fight draining out of him. For the first time, he looked old. You have 7 days, I said, to vacate my property. My mother gasped. Our home. You mean my house, I corrected. Missed the deadline, and the recording goes public. I'll let the authorities decide who goes to prison. Silence swallowed the room. For years, they told me I was nothing. Tonight, nothing answered back. 3 months later, I sat in that same study. My study now. The walls were bare where my parents' portraits once hung. The house felt quieter, without their performances echoing through it. Arthur and Martha were broke, forced to sell what little they had left to pay legal fees and restitution deals. Beatrice's wedding was cancelled. The Sterling family vanished overnight, allergic to scandal. Their reputation, their true currency, was gone. I watched sunlight spill across the desk and thought about something my mother once said. Flowers need dirt. She was right. She just forgot something important. The dirt owns the ground. And now, so did I. Justice doesn't arrive with sirens. It arrives quietly after the noise is over. 3 months after that night, I stood alone in the kitchen of the house that had never felt like home, until now. The walls were freshly painted. The silence wasn't tense anymore. It was honest. Arthur and Martha Whitford were gone. They hadn't packed carefully. Rage doesn't fold clothes. They left behind dust outlines where furniture used to be, like ghosts who'd fled mid-performance. I kept the house, not because I loved it, but because I refused to let them pretend it never belonged to me. The investigation never went public. Not fully. Arthur made a deal. Restitution. Quiet cooperation. A slow, humiliating unraveling that stripped him of his clubs, his friends, his reputation. The things he valued more than his children. Beatrice tried calling once. I didn't answer. Some people think justice means forgiveness. They're wrong. Justice means balance. For the first time in my life, I slept without a knot in my chest. I didn't dream of proving myself. I didn't rehearse conversations that would never happen. I woke up without needing permission to exist. I fixed my credit. Slowly. Methodically. Like rebuilding a spine. Every fraudulent account was documented. Every lie traced back to its source. It took time, but time was something I finally had. One afternoon, while sorting old boxes in the attic, I found a photo. Me, 7 years old, sitting on the basement steps, smiling too hard, waiting for someone to notice I was there. I sat down on the dusty floor and held it longer than I expected. That was the girl they thought would never fight back. That was the girl who survived anyway. People ask me sometimes if it hurt to turn on my family. I tell them the truth. You can't betray people who already sold you. You can't burn bridges that were never built. What hurt wasn't what I did. What hurt was realizing how long I'd been invisible and how strong you have to become to survive that. I sold the house 6 months later. Not out of spite. Out of closure. I donated part of the money to a legal fund for identity theft victims. People like me. People who were told to be quiet, to endure, to sacrifice themselves so others could shine. The rest? I invested it. In my future. In myself. The world didn't clap. There was no applause track. No apology letters. No dramatic reconciliation scene. And that was okay. Because justice isn't about them realizing they were wrong. It's about you realizing you were never weak. They used to say Beatrice was the flower and I was the dirt. They weren't wrong. They just misunderstood what dirt is. Dirt holds everything up. Dirt remembers every footprint. Dirt outlasts the storm. And one day, when the performance ends, when the lights go out, when the lies collapse, the ground is all that remains. And this time, the ground belonged to me.